Welcome to MMA Fan Guys. My name is Luke Basin. Welcome back to everyone who's already a subscriber to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe to the MMA Fancast YouTube channel so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now, a special guest returning to the show. She's been on the show on and off for the last several years, and she is not only a professional MMA fighter, she's also a professional kickboxer and a professional boxer. Very excited to have the Honey Badger, Lateesha Mohl, back on the show. Lateesha, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always so excited to come on here and talk to you. This is one of my favorite fan casts to be on. So thank you for having me.
You are always so nice to come on. And I started following when you were an amateur, when you're fighting amateur MMA and then a couple other kickboxing, some things like that. Now you're very well established. You're just coming off of a wonderful unanimous decision win for CFFC, which is very high level regional promotion. And you are now 2-0 as a pro. And I'm going to ask you to back up because I believe, shame on me, but I don't think I've had you on after you got your pro MMA. I do think I had you on for boxing and maybe kickboxing, but catch us up on your first MMA fight, kind of how it came together, how you felt it, how it went, and then obviously we'll get to the one you just had.
Yeah, I don't think I've been on since maybe my first kickboxing fight, I think it was. So yeah, my last MMA fight, or my first pro MMA fight, I should say, was also with CFFC. And it was kind of a redemption matchup for me. I fought Sandy Chang, who I fought as an amateur, and I broke my collarbone in my amateur fight against her, so I had lost that fight. So we fought as pros, which was a really good and challenging first fight for me because Sandy is a great fighter. She's a great athlete. So our first fight was pretty back and forth. You know, kind of kicking off the ring rust at that point. Did some things I well and then did some things I didn't do well in that first fight, but we made the adjustments. And that definitely showed in my most recent MMA fight.
And so great. I mean, great synopsis of your first fight. What was the result of that? You won, but how did you win and how did it feel to get that redemption?
Yeah, so against Sandy Chang, my fight was a unanimous decision win. It felt great. I was really excited, obviously, to win my first pro MMA fight. It's something that's kind of been in the making for a long time and just was not happening because, it's hard to get matched as a female. And like I said, I wasn't thrilled with how the fight went. I did a lot of things I could have done better. But I kind of just used that as fuel for, this most recent fight that I had. And it was a good test. It was good to know that I can fight 3 5-minute rounds and my cardio, was still intact and felt great. So learned a lot of good things from that fight.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then coming into this fight, how did the matchup come together? And sort of what were your thoughts coming into this fight that you just had?
Yeah, so CFFC offered me this matchup against Mariah Castro, who again I've known she's been around as long as I have. We actually fought on the same card as amateurs. We were on the same card in New York together, so I knew of her. I know she's a fantastic wrestler. I know she's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. She's no joke. She's a legit fighter. She was 6-3 as an amateur. She's 2-1 as a pro before we fought. So she's a legit girl. She fought for Combate Global, which is another huge, promotion. She's had tough fights. She's fought tough chicks, and she is a tough chick herself. She's probably one of the toughest girls I've ever fought. And she's so nice. She's so sweet. But I was familiar with her. I sent my matchup to the coaches, and they thought it was a good matchup. But we knew that it was a hard matchup. Um, every fight I take, I feel like I never take an easy fight. I like being the underdog. I like having that, that fire and that push to kind of just give it everything I have. So, it was great. I'm happy that they accepted the matchup as well.
Well, and it's good perspective because I know you had pro fights as kickboxing and boxing, but in MMA you were 1-0, taking on a lady who was 2-1. So that is the step up, right? That's the kind of the building your record against better opponents with better records and things like that. Now I got to watch what you posted on Facebook, some of the clips, and
Mhm.
you had just mentioned that this opponent was a great wrestler, great jiu-jitsu. Well, I saw that somehow you ended up on in top position with ground and pound. So how did that all kind of play out, and kind of walk us through the rounds? I know you got a unanimous decision, so clearly you controlled most of the fight, but I'm sure there were some moments that stand out.
Yeah, so the first round actually, I don't know if it was maybe a minute or two into the first round, we're kind of feeling each other out. And she goes for a shot, which we were ready for. We expected for her to obviously wrestle. And I threw a knee and she kind of just got kneed in the face as she went for the shot, fell down, and then I was on top for ground and pound. And we had the pleasure of having Keith Peterson as our ref. Um,
Oh,
who I think is a great ref. I know a lot of people have their opinions. I think he's a great ref. I know that he likes to kind of give the benefit of the doubt to the fighters and lets them fight through things. And like I said, Mariah is a tough opponent. And she was able to kind of, get her wits about her, and was recovering on the ground. So my coaches yelled for me to let her stand up. So I know a lot of people had questions about that. Why'd you let her up? She was initially hurt. And at that point, if the ref didn't feel the need to stop the fight, I wasn't going to take the risk of potentially getting in a ground position with her as a brown belt,
sure.
and giving her time to recover. So we let her stand back up, and then after that, it essentially was, a striking match, favored heavily on my side.
Wow, well, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad you got to kind of explain. First off, I know you have great fans, and I know CFFC has tons and tons of fans of CFFC. So it's good that those questions come up. But one thing that's always kind of different, I think, about fighting, because it is a one-on-one sport, what matters is what you do, right? I used to say that from the corner. You have great coaches. We're going to talk about that. And obviously, they had a game plan. And yeah, sometimes people don't realize that it's better to do something that maybe other people would think, well, I wouldn't get up from there. Fine, you don't have to. You're the fighter. You're the one that gets to
Sure.
decide. I would actually say, as a coach and a corner when I was coaching, I would say, hey, I'm going to tell you stuff, but you're the fighter that has to decide what you're
Yeah.
going to do or not do. So obviously, you're very comfortable in boxing and very comfortable in kickboxing. So it makes sense that that the fight continued being very favored. That was the first round? Was there any kind of difference in the second round, or was it all kickboxing? What did the second round look like?
Yeah, so the rest of the first round, again, our game plan was kind of first round, no kicks. With her being a wrestler, I don't want to take the risk of her catching a kick. And then after the first round, and first round, I usually almost always lose in my fights. I feel like this fight was the exception, but it's like a feeler round for me. I just kind of like to see what's going to happen, what's going on, what's working. Second round, we started adding in more kicks. Third round was just full on boxing, kickboxing, whatever I saw, whatever my coaches were yelling for. I rely heavily on one of those fighters that relies heavily on my corner. Um, Sometimes almost too much, which is again something I'm working on. But if they tell me to do something, I'm gonna do it. So the rest of it was kind of them just, kind of playing. My one corner, Zach, says to him it's like playing a video game. He presses the buttons and then I do it for them. So it was a probably the most fun I've ever had in a fight.
Well, I mean, that is great. You have talked openly on this show in the past when you were an amateur about dealing with sports psychology and making sure that your mind was right because your physical abilities have been there for a while. I love the fact that I think every coach wants a fighter that's kind of like a video game, meaning the skills are there, but they're willing to kind of do what the coach says when. And obviously, you have that connection there. What do you think made it the most fun? Obviously, getting a win over a tough opponent. Was it just how smoothly your striking was and all that? What made it the most fun so far?
Yeah, like you said with the sports psychology, I work with her name's Anne. Previously it was Great Sports Minds, now it's called Inner Gain Coach. Same woman. And for this fight it was weird, like beforehand, anyone who says they're not nervous before a fight is a liar. So, I had my normal nerves before my fight, but I was almost kind of like, why am I not more nervous? And then I was kind of psyching myself out because I'm like, shouldn't I feel more nervous? And I was just felt really calm and kind of like, collected beforehand. But yeah, I'd say I was super, the clarity was there. I was in like a flow state, everything. I could just kind of see everything. I could hear everything, my corners. I was talking back to my corners in the middle of the fight. I couldn't hear them. So like that's how I know I'm in a flow state when I'm in the middle of a fight. I can almost hold a conversation with my corner through my body language or through gestures. And yeah, I just felt, it was smooth sailing. It was a lot of fun. I was trying, some new things that I've been working on. So I had a blast.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. The flow state makes, it takes a lot of work to get to there. Kevin, the Trailblazer, Holland at the UFC level, kind of, I think, popularized it, but it all depends on the fighter. But he's had full conversations, sometimes with the commentators.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it works for you. And maybe in many ways, it kind of prevents you from thinking too much when you're able to kind of have that external feedback. Now, we've mentioned your coaches and your corner, and you train out of two gyms, a boxing gym and an MMA gym, which makes sense to get the well-roundedness. So talk us through the gyms, how long you've been training at them, and kind of how you're fit there on those two gyms and the coaches and things like that.
Yeah, so I train under Claudie Kenyon. He runs Unite Central PA Boxing Club in Harrisburg. I've been with him for, oh God, probably I'd say 6 or 7 years. I'm not exactly sure. I've been with him for a long time. Um, and he's really responsible for my boxing, for my footwork, and my cardio. He's has my cardio to a point where, it's not going to get any better than what it is now. So, and then for my MMA, jujitsu, and kickboxing, I train out of Gracie 717, who's owned by Damian Puopolo. He's the main the owner, black belt in jiu-jitsu. And then my coaches for MMA, Christian Carr, Zach Kelly, my fiance Jeff Patoka also is in my corner. And they do everything else with me. They're fantastic. They're so knowledgeable. They've been in the fight game for years. I've been with them probably for 7 or 8 years as well. So, two solid gyms, and we all work great together as one, as a team.
Yeah, I know that you've been representing. I knew Gracie 717. I've had the honor, not, I haven't had your fiance on, but I've had the honor of having Christian Carr and Zach Kelly. They've both been regular guests on this show. So, and I know you connect very well with them. So that is just, I mean, that is really wonderful. And like any, particularly you being a pro, hitting this flow state, hitting, the most fun, in many ways, the most dominant fight you've had when it comes at the pro level against a very, are you kind of like excited about the fact that this happens particularly on the pro side, that every time you get a win, your next opponent's going to be tougher, right? That people don't always understand this, because today's Super Bowl, people don't understand that in other sports, the schedule is made a year in advance, and you could end up playing somebody that is mismatched, right? You could end up being a 5-1 football team playing an 0-6 team, right? That happens in the NFL. That does not happen at the pro level. You kind of constantly get re-rated So you now at 2-0, just taking out a 2-1 opponent. What are your thoughts about kind of knowing that like your next opponent's going to be tougher because now you're 2-0, you're not 1-0, right? And as you get better, your opponents get better. What are your thoughts for that, just as a mindset?
Yeah, and I'm excited. I love a challenge. I'm very competitive. And I think, I've, like I said earlier, I've always had hard fights. I'm almost always the underdog going into fights. I'm okay with that. To me, that fuels the fire for me. It makes me work harder. I'm always the underdog, but I'm never underprepared. So a lot of the times, even if, I'm fighting someone with a really great record, I have the fuel because I want to try to beat them. They're already really good. It makes for great fights regardless of the outcome. My main thing for me being a pro athlete, I want to make it as far as I can in fighting. So that entails taking, the toughest fights that I can. But I also want to have entertaining fights. I can be undefeated, but if all of my fights are boring, nobody wants to watch that. So, I'm here to win. I'm here to be exciting. I'm here to put on a good show, and I'm up for the challenge. I'm humble, but I'm confident. So I'm excited to see, what the next thing will look like.
Well, and I know it'll get even more exciting for you from here. And you've really shown to use, for a lot of people that maybe are still amateur fighters, they can look on Tapology that you really used your amateur career to figure things out, right? There were some low points there, but you really figured things out, training and also the emotional, the mindset wise. And I think that's one thing that people don't always use the amateur time to really take tough fights and really challenge yourself. And if there are issues, if issues do come up, performance-wise, figure them out as an amateur. So I think to be undefeated now, 2-0 as a pro, plus the boxing, plus the kickboxing, really shows that figuring things out as an amateur really works. Now, we've talked about your gyms and your corners as far as your coaches go, but there's an unseen part of who's in your corner, and that's the sponsorship. Now, I know that you actually had your sponsors written on your shorts or your pants, so you gave them credit. But let's talk about, one, who your sponsors are. That's always important. But also, one of the things I found important for MMA Fancast is to talk about the value to you as an up-and-coming, you want to see as far as you can go for these sponsorships that sometimes don't get the credit they deserve.
Yeah, sponsors are a huge part for me for my camp. It's a great way to support local businesses and to kind of get their name out there in a sport that's up and coming. It's fun for them to see their logo on, a fighter's shorts and in pictures and things like that. But it really does get them, it gets their name out. It gets them the eyes that they deserve. And for me, the sponsorship money, I try not to ask for too much, but a lot of it goes right into the fight camp. It goes into training gear, it goes into gym fees, food, travel, gas, things like that, because I do travel a lot for my training. But with that being said, my sponsors, who I absolutely love and am so grateful for, Unite Central PA Boxing Club and Gracie 717, both of my gyms, Noble Boxing, which is ran by my corner and my coach, Zach Kelly. Inner Gain coach, who's my mental sports psychologist, and she's just fantastic. She's been with me for years. Jim's Garage Crew, absolutely love them. They're great people. Spin City DJs is my dad's DJ business. So if you need DJ services, reach out to him. Out in the Lights is a friend of mine who makes my custom outfits for me, and they're always, they look dope. So if you need custom, fight gear, he does rash guards, he does everything. Hopped Excavating, if you need any excavation needs, that's my brother-in-law. And then Sills for laundry services in the Lebanon County area. So thank you to all my sponsors. I love them so much.
Yeah, and I appreciate that list. That was a great list and really shows the variety. One last thing to talk about for sponsors, and you had kind of said it, is make sure if you're in the area, if you can give any of them business, to make sure that you tell them, hey, I saw your logo on Lateesha's fight shorts, or I was watching MMA Fancast. Because sometimes fighters are good at driving customers to the businesses, but sometimes people don't feel comfortable. You can always say, hey, this is how I heard about you. It helps the person know that, in this case, Lateesha's getting your name out there. But that's just something that kind of helps close the loop. And everybody is always happy to hear how you found out about them. So I love the variety. That's one thing I think that is sad about the UFC level. Clearly, they only have like a couple mandated, and that's fine. If you get to that level, that's great. But I like the variety. The mom and pop garages, the excavating, all the connections related to you. My brother runs a garage, a local mom and pop garage in my town, and I think about that.
Oh,
I
great.
think about like how important those type things are. So great job. And also bringing up sort of the small businesses that really do make a difference. So that is fantastic. It's always incredible having you on the show. Obviously, I apologize to missing a couple of your fights, but thankfully Facebook brought up the fact that you are now 2-0 as a pro. I can't wait to continue to follow your career, something that I've really enjoyed doing on MMA Fancast ever since you were an amateur. So can't wait to have you back on whenever you have your next pro fight coming up. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. Love talking to you. I'll come on anytime you're happy to have me. Thank you so much.
That is an absolute honor. I can't wait to have you back on. You've been listening to Luke Bass from MMA Fancast with the one, the only Lateesha, the Honey Badger. Mohl, thanks so much for coming on.